Hello students, I'm making these videos for you to be able to study in your own pace. So it's easier for you to prepare for the exams and quizzes and all of those, all right? So this is AS Psychology 9990. I'm your teacher. I'm gonna break it down into 10-minute videos or so it's quite handleable, all right? So I told you before who I am. For those who weren't there on our first day of class, I'm Teacher Rafael. My name means thanks or thank you. I am a licensed psychologist and counselor, and your teacher, of course. I ask you to introduce yourselves. I'll slowly get to know all of you again. Whenever you recite and share things in class. The objective of this first video is, of course, to introduce you to psychology, talk about the history briefly, and talk about how psychology should be a science to avoid the mistakes of the past. All right, so here's an example of trephinning or trepanning, which was the treatment to, believe it or not, headaches, because there was a mystical belief that headaches or throbbing from the head are possessions. And because there was no way to scientifically explain how they are acquired, how it goes away, how it is treated, um, this was accepted as one possible explanation. And I guess it's out of desperation because people didn't know how to do it. So why not crack a skull, right? Drill a hole and let the demon go out because it was a throbbing head, anyways. So without much methodology, um, it sounds crazy, but in a way, if you are coming from nowhere, it kind of makes sense to have such a treatment, right? So that's trephining. Another way to spell trephining is they also say trepanning. Um, this was centuries ago. No one does this anymore. But there are some cases where the a hole in the brain is drilled for neurosurgery, but then they cover it again with bone cement. Um, but we don't do it for migraines, yeah. Surgery, yeah, probably, right? Okay. Here's an example of a trial for a witch. This was following the manual of Malleus Maleficarum, or the witch's hammer, written by a religious person, I think a bishop, on how to hunt witches. And if you examine historical records, witches may not be, demonic persons who mean ill to others. Maybe some of them do, but the point is, maybe they're just people with mental health issues, schizophrenia, dissociative identity disorder, and all of those, right? If you think about it. Now, here's what we call the humoral theory. This has nothing to do with humor or something funny, although it is quite ridiculous. But humor, sorry, let me put a U here for a British spelling. Humor was believed to be the movement of fluids or liquids in our body that could influence our thoughts and behaviors. And there were believed to be four major fluids in our body. So that's phlegm, yellow bile, black bile, and blood. I'm not sure if I'm putting it in the right position in the image, but those are the four main known fluids in our body during that time, and they were believed to be affecting our behaviors and thought processes. Why? Because it was moving in our body, so maybe it, in a way, dictates our movement, our actions, our decisions. In a way, to change a person's unusual behavior or to change a personality is to add more or to remove certain fluids. So sometimes people will be forced to spit, to vomit, to remove some blood or and the other liquids like pancreatic juice or yellow bile and then black bile. It sounded ridiculous, but it was a beginning of some form of experimentation, if you think about it, in exploring personality and behavior. We all know that it's untrue, right? Now, here's an example of um, a discussion among physicians about the concept of hysteria, which is believed to be a treatment or a condition that women have. Hysteria from the word hysteron. So let me just type it here. Or psychosis or nervous breakdown or whatever. But hysteria was an old term because it was believed to be only among women, um, from the root word hysteron, which means womb. And the idea, the very old idea, even before this guy came into the picture, was that because of having an empty womb and having space or air in a woman's body, it could affect behavior, feeling of emptiness or loneliness or emotional instability. Therefore, we should treat women with an empty womb. And a very old belief was, just uh, press on the belly to remove the air or impregnate the woman, because this is the old belief. Their place is at home and to raise children, blah blah blah. um, these are not scientifically true beliefs or ideas, and we now know that men experience depression, emotional instability, but they manifest as less obtrusive, less observable behavior, right? It doesn't mean the men don't experience difficulties, they just express it differently. And during this time, it was, I guess, societally or naturally sexist because most doctors during that time were men, all men, right? Just like when Freud formed the psychoanalytic society in Austria, they were all male psychoanalysts. Okay, now this guy, we talked about him. I hope you still remember. Let me change the color. Phineas Gage. So I don't know if this has anything to do with the show Phineas and Ferb with an unusually shaped head, right? But this has some history with um, a damaged skull. So he worked at uh, the railway system in the U.S. during the Industrial Revolution, and for some freak accident, a steel pipe passed through his skull, coming from the cheek, going out to the top of his skull. He certain chunks or portions of his brain came out of his mouth, actually, and of course the metal pipe or steel pipe was removed. He remained alive, his brain is intact, but his personality changed and other aspects about his thought processes changed as well. So people began to theorize that certain parts of your brain are responsible for certain functions, including personality, memory, etc., and so on. So we call this the localization theory. Okay, that certain parts of the brain are responsible. It's actually not a theory because it is proven to be true, and we know this because we can now do, at this time and age, we can do brain imaging, right? And maybe some of you have had brain imaging using the MRI, the fMRI. An older version would be the CT scan. Usually used for bones, but can also be used on the skull. But for brain scans, probably more MRI and fMRI. We'll talk about those next time. But yeah, that's Phineas Gage right there, right? This is a depiction of a scene in Bedlam. Bedlam, an institution for the mentally ill or the insane in the UK, which became an attraction at, not decades but centuries ago, when there was no way to treat uh, people who were mentally ill, and there were no ethical standards in the care for the mentally ill. They they made it like a show, and they were able to earn money from people who attend the show, which is just going there and observing people behave in unusual ways. And of course they will behave in unusual ways because they have a mental health condition. So yeah. um Magical thinking, unusual self beliefs like being able to um, play an instrument, talking to an invisible thing, use unusual use of objects. This is probably what we call waxy flexibility, wherein you stay in one position like a Barbie doll, right? And then when they move your arm, you move it, but it stays hanging, etc., and so on. This also was a way for clinicians or psychologists who look at conditions, specific conditions or diagnoses, to put a name to different behaviors so that they can be assessed more carefully. But we don't need to go into that unless we will do A levels, which will be grade 12. Now, to move forward and to be able to help people, psychology must be a science, and it is the science of behavior and mental processes. So, psychology is the study, all right, the study of behavior and mental processes. And in this science, we will understand behavior and mental processes. We will be able to explain it, why it happens. We will be able to predict behavior based on how it's connected to other variables. For example, we will be able to predict the effects of lack of sleep, for example, on attention, on memory, on task performance, right? So that's just an example. And lastly, to a certain extent, we can change behavior, and it's actually being done whenever we collect data from people and we use that data against people. We can make them choose who to vote, make them choose what to buy, who to make friends, etc. Uh, Crucial stuff, right? But yeah, the study of psychology can lead to a change in behavior, change of the behavior of many people, which becomes messy. We'll go through it one at a time. But that's basically it. I'll promise to keep it less than 15 minutes, so I'll make another video for the next part. Thanks.